You reach a certain age, and sometimes it feels like the world just keeps spinning. But you're stuck in place. Maybe you feel like you've lost a step, or maybe you just don't have the energy you used to. You might look in the mirror and not quite recognize the person looking back. That was me at 63. I felt heavy, not just in my body, but in my spirit. Like all the doors I thought were open were suddenly closing. Hopeless feels like a strong word, but honestly, that's how it felt sometimes. Like, is this it? Is this all there is now? Getting out of bed felt like a chore. Finding joy in little things felt impossible. I saw others my age still vibrant, still active, and I just felt left behind. Like a ship that had run aground while the rest of the fleet sailed on. It was a quiet desperation, the kind you don't always talk about, but it gnaws at you. You start thinking, maybe this is just what getting older is. And that thought, right there, is perhaps the most dangerous one of all. But something shifted. I stumbled onto some simple things. Things I honestly overlooked for years. Little changes that felt too small to matter. But they did. They didn't just pull me out of that feeling. They started to rebuild me, piece by piece. In this video, I'm going to share what those things were. They're not complicated. No magic pills or impossible routines. Just practical, everyday shifts. Watch to the end. Because the biggest surprise for me was just how simple the answer really was. Feeling like you've lost your spark as you get older is more common than we talk about. It's easy to fall into a routine where everything feels a bit beige, a bit muted. You might have aches and pains, or just a general lack of get up and go. For me, at 63, it started subtly. Little things. Not wanting to go for walks anymore. Feeling tired even after a full night's sleep. Not picking up the phone to chat with friends as often. It crept in, like a slow fog. Soon, that feeling of being tired turned into feeling low. And that feeling low started to feel like hopelessness. You start questioning everything. What's the point? What am I even doing? I remember one morning, I just sat on the edge of the bed for what felt like an hour, just staring at the wall. I had nowhere to be, nothing I particularly wanted to do. And the thought hit me. Is this it? Is this my life now? It was a scary thought, a really scary thought. It felt like I was just waiting for, well, I didn't even know what. Waiting for time to pass, I suppose. That was the painful reality. The feeling of just existing, not living, of watching life happen around me while I was stuck on the sidelines. It felt like being trapped in my own head, in my own body. My world had shrunk. Things that used to bring me joy felt like too much effort. Cooking a meal felt like a monumental task. Going out to the shops felt exhausting before I even left the house. And the loneliness, even when I was around people. I felt this disconnect, like I couldn't quite reach them, or they couldn't reach me. It was a heavy blanket that I couldn't shake off. I tried telling myself to snap out of it, to just get on with things, but it didn't work. The inertia was too strong. The feeling of being stuck was overwhelming. I felt like I was losing myself, losing the person I used to be. The one who was curious, who loved to laugh, who enjoyed simple pleasures. That person felt very far away. I started to worry about my memory, about my ability to do things. Every little forgetfulness felt like a sign that I was declining, that this was just the beginning of a slow fade. That added another layer to the hopelessness, the fear of what was coming, the fear of losing my independence, of becoming a burden. It was a vicious cycle. The less I did, the less energy I had. The less energy I had, the more hopeless I felt. The more hopeless I felt, the less I wanted to do. It felt impossible to break free. I remember seeing adverts for all sorts of things: energy boosters, memory supplements, exercise programs. But I felt too tired to even try. Too cynical. I thought, what's the point? Nothing is going to change this. I was resigned to it. I thought this was just my new normal. The chapter of my life where things just slowed down, ground to a halt, where the color drained away. But then, something shifted. It wasn't a sudden change, like flipping a switch. It was gradual, almost imperceptible at first, like a tiny crack of light appearing in the darkness. And it all started with something surprisingly simple. It wasn't a grand plan or a dramatic intervention. It was just trying something different, something small, something that felt manageable. Even in my state of low energy and low spirits, it felt almost accidental, like I just stumbled into it. And that stumble, that small step, started a chain reaction, a ripple effect that slowly, gently, began to change everything. It started with a change in how I spoke to myself, the stories I was telling myself about getting older, about my capabilities. I was telling myself I was over the hill, that my best years were behind me. And guess what? My body and my mind were listening. They were acting according to that script I was writing. So, the first thing that started to shift was acknowledging that negative self-talk, not fighting it, not getting angry at myself for feeling that way, but just noticing it, noticing the constant stream of, "I'm too old. I can't do that anymore. What's the point?" That was the first crack of light, realizing that a big part of my hopelessness wasn't just physical decline, but the story I was telling myself about that decline. It was the mindset. I had bought into the idea that 60-something meant slowing down, winding down, becoming less. And that belief was a powerful, self-fulfilling prophecy. So, the very first thing, before I even changed anything physical, was trying to change that inner narrative. It wasn't easy. The thoughts were deeply ingrained. But I started small. When a negative thought popped up, like, "I'm too tired to go for a walk," I'd try to counter it, just gently, with something like, "Maybe I could just walk to the end of the street," or "A little fresh air might feel nice." It wasn't about forcing myself to feel positive all the time, which felt impossible anyway. It was about challenging the absolute nature of the negative thoughts, about introducing a tiny bit of doubt into the certainty of my own decline. That shift, from absolute resignation to questioning the narrative, was foundational. It created a tiny bit of space, a tiny bit of room for possibility. It was like opening a window in a stuffy room. The air didn't instantly become fresh, but there was a chance for it to change. This mental shift was slow. Some days were better than others. Some days the old thoughts would come rushing back, overwhelming me. But I kept trying. I read things, watched videos about the power of mindset as we age, and it started to sink in. It wasn't about pretending I was 30 again. It was about accepting where I was, but refusing to accept the narrative of inevitable decline and hopelessness. It was about finding possibility within the reality of aging. That was the very first step, and it was crucial, because without that small shift in mindset, nothing else I tried would have worked. I would have just found reasons why it wouldn't, why I couldn't. So, if you're feeling stuck, feeling that hopelessness, the first thing is to notice the story you're telling yourself. Is it a story of winding down? Or could it be a story of a new chapter? Different but still rich and meaningful. Just asking that question was the beginning of everything. Now, changing your mindset is one thing, and it's powerful. But it felt a bit abstract at first when my body still felt heavy and sluggish. That's where the second key piece came in. The one that felt more tangible, more immediate. It was about movement. Not running marathons, not lifting heavy weights, just simple, Gentle movement, as I mentioned. Even walking to the shops felt too much. My energy levels were non-existent. But I knew, deep down, that sitting still all the time wasn't helping. So, building on that tiny shift in mindset, that little bit of questioning my own limitations, I decided to try something incredibly small. I started by just walking around my garden for 5 minutes. Literally, just 5 minutes. Pacing back and forth, looking at the flowers or the birds. It felt pathetic at first. Like, is this it? Am I really this out of shape? But I did it. And the next day, I did it again. And then the next. It wasn't about pushing myself hard. It was just about moving the body, about breaking the inertia. After a few days, I extended it to 10 minutes. Then, I tried walking to the end of my street and back. It was slow going. I felt a bit breathless, a bit stiff, but I also felt something. A tiny flicker of energy perhaps, or maybe just the satisfaction of having done something I had previously thought was too much. It was a small victory, but it felt significant. This gentle movement started to have unexpected effects. My sleep improved slightly, not dramatically at first, but I felt a little more tired in the evening, and the morning stiffness wasn't quite as bad. It wasn't a miracle cure, but it was progress. And that progress fueled the mindset shift. See, they started working together. The physical movement made the possibility I'd considered mentally feel a little more real. I wasn't just telling myself I could do things. I was actually doing a small thing. It felt like waking up muscles and joints that had been asleep. I wasn't tracking steps. I wasn't aiming for a certain distance. It was purely about moving my body consistently, every single day, rain or shine. I committed to at least 10 minutes of gentle walking, even if it was just around the house if the weather was bad. And gradually, over weeks and months, those 10 minutes became 15, then 20. I started to venture a little further from home, exploring my neighborhood. I wasn't speed walking. I was just strolling, looking at the houses, the trees, saying hello to people I passed. It became a habit, and not a chore. It became something I actually looked forward to. This gentle movement did more than just improve my physical stamina slightly. It also helped with that feeling of being trapped in my head. When I was walking, my mind felt clearer. The negative thoughts still popped up, but they didn't stick around as long. It was like the movement helped to shake them loose. It gave me a different focus. The feel of the air on my skin, the sounds of the birds, the rhythm of my own breathing. It was a form of mindfulness, I suppose. Without even trying, just being present in my body, moving through the world. It sounds so simple, almost ridiculously so. But it was profound. It was the opposite of sitting still and letting the hopelessness consume me. It was taking action, however small, to literally move myself out of that state. The other thing about this gentle movement was that it wasn't competitive. There was no pressure. I wasn't comparing myself to anyone else. I was just moving for the sake of moving, for the sake of feeling a little better. And because I started so small, it felt achievable. That's key. I think, when you feel overwhelmed, the last thing you need is to set impossible goals. 5 minutes of walking. Almost anyone can do that. And that small success builds confidence. It makes the next small step feel possible. So, if you're feeling low on energy, feeling stuck, don't think you have to sign up for a gym membership or start running. Just start with movement that feels easy, accessible, and gentle. Walk around your living room. Walk to the mailbox. Walk to the end of your drive. It doesn't matter how far. It matters that you move. It breaks the inertia, both physical and mental. It's a powerful antidote to that feeling of being stuck. It's like telling your body and your mind, okay, we're not shutting down. We're still moving. And that message, delivered consistently, even in tiny doses, can be incredibly powerful in pulling you out of that hopeless feeling. It was for me. It was the foundation upon which everything else was built. The combination of gently challenging my negative mindset and committing to gentle, consistent movement was the 1-2 punch that started to chip away at the wall of hopelessness I had built around myself. It wasn't about feeling perfect or suddenly having boundless energy. It was about creating a little bit of forward momentum, a little bit of positive change that I could see and feel, however small. And that momentum, that feeling of progress, even tiny progress, was incredibly motivating. It made me think, okay, if I can do this little bit, maybe I can try something else. And that led me to the next piece of the puzzle, something that nourished my body in a different way, which also had a profound impact on my energy and my mood. Following the gentle movement, which had started to give me a little bit of physical momentum, I realized I needed to address how I was fueling myself. When I was feeling hopeless, my eating habits weren't great. It was a lot of convenience food, things that were easy but not particularly nourishing. I didn't have the energy or the motivation to cook proper meals. And I was probably also eating my feelings a bit, reaching for comfort foods that gave a temporary lift, but left me feeling worse afterwards. I wasn't thinking about nutrition. I was just thinking about filling my belly with whatever was easiest. And that certainly wasn't helping my energy levels or my overall mood. So, the next step was to gently introduce some more nourishing foods. Again, this wasn't about going on a strict diet or cutting out everything I enjoyed. That would have felt too overwhelming and likely wouldn't have lasted. It was about making small, manageable additions and swaps. I started by making sure I drank enough water. It sounds so basic, doesn't it? But when you're feeling low, even remembering to drink water can be a challenge. I bought a nice water bottle and tried to keep it with me, sipping from it throughout the day. Dehydration can really contribute to fatigue and fuzzy thinking, and I suspect I was often mildly dehydrated. Just consistently drinking water made a noticeable difference in my energy levels and how clear my head felt. It was a simple change, but important. Then, I started adding more fruits and vegetables where I could, again, not aiming for perfection. If I was having toast for breakfast, I'd add a banana or some berries. If I was having a sandwich for lunch, I'd try to include some lettuce and tomato, or have a side of carrots or cucumber sticks. For dinner, instead of just pasta, I'd throw in some frozen peas or spinach. It wasn't gourmet cooking. It was just making small tweaks to what I was already eating. I also started trying to include a bit more protein in my meals, adding a handful of nuts to my yogurt, having an egg for breakfast, or making sure there was some chicken, fish, or beans in my dinner. I'd read that protein is important for muscle strength and energy, especially as you get older, and while I wasn't suddenly building huge muscles, I did feel a difference in my sustained energy throughout the day. Instead of that afternoon slump hitting me so hard, I felt a bit more steady. I also became more mindful of sugary snacks. I wasn't banning them entirely, because that felt restrictive, but I started to notice how I felt after eating them. The quick burst of energy followed by a crash that left me feeling even worse than before. So, I started trying to choose snacks that were more balanced, like a piece of fruit and a handful of nuts, or some yogurt. Again, it wasn't about being perfect. It was about making slightly better choices more often. These small dietary shifts, combined with the gentle movement, really started to boost my energy levels. It wasn't like I suddenly felt 20 again, but I had more energy to do things, more energy to walk a bit further, more energy to tackle small tasks around the house, more energy to just engage with the world around me. This improved energy had a ripple effect on my mood. When you feel physically better, it's hard not to feel a bit better mentally too. That heavy blanket of hopelessness started to lift a little more. It wasn't gone completely, but it didn't feel as suffocating. I started to feel a glimmer of motivation to do things I hadn't felt like doing for ages. And one of the things I started to feel a pull towards was connecting with people. When I was feeling low and stuck, I'd isolated myself. It felt like too much effort to see friends or even talk on the phone. I felt like I didn't have anything interesting to say, or that my low mood would bring others down. So I stayed home, and that just made the loneliness worse. But as my energy improved and my mindset started to shift, the idea of connecting didn't feel quite so daunting. It started small. A text message to a friend I hadn't spoken to in a while. Then, a short phone call. It was hard at first, pushing myself to reach out, but the response was always positive. My friends were just happy to hear from me, and talking to them, even for a few minutes, reminded me that I wasn't alone. It broke the feeling of isolation that had been such a big part of my hopelessness. I started meeting a friend for a short walk and a coffee. We wouldn't even talk about anything heavy, just chat about our day, laugh about silly things. Those simple interactions were incredibly powerful. They reminded me that I was still part of the world, that people cared, that there was still joy to be found in shared moments. I also looked for simple ways to connect with people in my everyday life. Saying hello to my neighbors, making small talk with the shop assistant, smiling at people I passed on my walk. These tiny interactions might seem insignificant, but they add up. They create a sense of belonging, a feeling of being seen and connected. Even in small ways, they chip away at that feeling of invisibility that can sometimes come with age. And finally, with this newfound energy and connection, I started to rediscover simple joys when I was feeling hopeless. Nothing felt joyful. Everything felt like a struggle. But as I started to feel better physically and mentally, I started noticing things again. The way the light falls in the afternoon, the smell of rain, the taste of a really good cup of tea. I started picking up books again, listening to music I hadn't listened to in years. I even started pottering in the garden a bit more, not with the aim of doing a big gardening project, but just to feel the soil, to look at the plants up close. These weren't grand, exciting activities. They were just small moments of pleasure, moments of being present and finding satisfaction in simple things. This wasn't something I forced. It happened naturally as the energy and the connection returned. The world started to feel less gray and more colorful. It was like the curtains were slowly being opened, letting the light back in. These simple joys were the reward for the small efforts I was making. They were the proof that life wasn't just about enduring. It was still about experiencing and enjoying. It was a powerful reminder that even in the midst of challenges, there is still beauty and pleasure to be found in the everyday. These steps, the gentle movement, the nourishing food, the reaching out for connection, and the rediscovery of simple joys, they weren't overnight fixes. They were gradual, sometimes messy, sometimes challenging. But they were the building blocks that helped me climb out of that feeling of hopelessness. One small step at a time. And as I continued on this path, I discovered even more subtle but impactful changes I could make. As these changes began to weave together, the shift in mindset, the gentle movement, the focus on nourishing food, the rekindling of connections, and the rediscovery of simple joys, I started to feel a momentum build. It wasn't a sudden leap out of the hopelessness, but more like a gradual climb up a gentle slope. And with that rising momentum came the realization that there were other aspects of my life that needed attention, things that could further support this journey towards feeling better. One of those was prioritizing rest. When I was feeling most hopeless and low on energy, my sleep was all over the place. Sometimes I couldn't fall asleep, my mind racing with worries and negative thoughts. Other times, I'd wake up in the middle of the night and couldn't get back to sleep. And even when I did sleep, it didn't feel restful. I'd wake up feeling just as tired, if not more so, than when I went to bed. I used to just accept it as part of getting older. Oh, older people just don't need as much sleep. Or bad sleep is just normal now. But I started to learn that good sleep is absolutely crucial for everything. For energy levels, for mood, for memory, for physical repair. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity. So, I started to focus on improving my sleep habits. Again, not aiming for perfect 8-hour nights right away, but making small, consistent efforts. I tried to go to bed and wake up around the same time each day, even on weekends. This helped regulate my body clock. I created a relaxing bedtime routine, winding down in the hour before bed. Maybe reading a book, listening to quiet music, or doing some gentle stretching. I made sure my bedroom was dark, quiet, and cool. I also tried to avoid screens, my phone, the TV, in that hour before bed. As I'd learned, the blue light can interfere with sleep signals. If I woke up in the night and couldn't get back to sleep after about 20 minutes, I'd get out of bed, sit in a dim room, read quietly for a bit, and only go back to bed when I felt sleepy again. This is to avoid associating the bed with frustration and wakefulness. These small changes to my sleep routine didn't work instantly, but over time, they made a real difference. I started falling asleep more easily, and those middle-of-the-night wake-ups became less frequent or shorter. And getting more restful sleep had a significant positive impact on my energy and mood during the day. It felt like my body and mind were finally getting a chance to properly rest and recharge. Another thing that became clear on this journey was the importance of engaging my mind. When I was feeling hopeless, I felt mentally sluggish. It was hard to concentrate, hard to feel interested in things. My memory felt fuzzy. I used to love reading and learning new things, but I'd lost the motivation. So, I started to gently reintroduce activities that challenged my brain a little. Crosswords, Sudoku, reading articles about topics I was interested in, even trying to learn a few words of a new language using an app. It wasn't about becoming a genius overnight. It was about keeping the brain active and engaged, like exercising a muscle. Using your brain helps keep it sharp, and I found that when my mind felt more active and engaged, I felt more alive, more curious, and less stuck in negative thought patterns. It was a reminder that aging doesn't have to mean mental decline. You can actively work to keep your mind vibrant. Putting all these pieces together, the mindset shift, the gentle movement, the nourishing food, the connection with others, finding simple joys, prioritizing rest, and keeping my mind engaged. It wasn't about achieving perfection in any one area. It was about making progress across several areas, letting them support and reinforce each other. It was a holistic approach, addressing my well-being on multiple levels. And it was all about consistency, not intensity. It was doing these small things, day after day, week after week, that created the lasting change. I want to reiterate, this wasn't a rapid transformation. It took time. There were days when I slipped back into old habits, days when the hopelessness felt like it was creeping back in. But the difference this time was that I knew what to do. I had tools. I knew that a few bad days didn't erase the progress I'd made. I could just gently guide myself back onto the path. I learned to be kinder to myself, to not expect perfection. Progress, not perfection, became my motto. And that gentle self-compassion was also a key part of the healing process. Beating yourself up for not doing enough, or for having a bad day, just keeps you stuck. Acknowledging the slip-up but choosing to get back on track the next moment, or the next day, is what allows you to move forward. So, looking back from where I am now, compared to that feeling of hopelessness at 63, it's like looking at two different people. I still have challenges. Life isn't suddenly perfect. But I have energy. I have curiosity. I have connection. And I have joy back in my life. The world feels colorful again. And the surprising thing, it wasn't one big dramatic change. It was a series of small, simple, Consistent actions. Things that felt almost too basic to make a difference. Changing how I spoke to myself. Walking a little each day. Eating slightly better. Reaching out to people. Finding joy in small things. Getting better sleep. Keeping my mind busy. None of these individually felt revolutionary. But together, they were. They were the this that pulled me out of that dark place. They were accessible. They were free or low cost. And they were within my control. If you are feeling anything like I was, that sense of being stuck, the low energy, the lack of joy, the feeling of hopelessness, please know that it is possible to feel better. You are not destined to fade away or just exist. There is still so much life to be lived, so much possibility. Start small. Pick just one thing, maybe the one that resonates with you the most from what I've shared, and try it. Just for today, or just for this week. Don't worry about the rest. Just that one small step, whether it's drinking an extra glass of water, walking for 10 minutes, calling a friend, or just noticing one beautiful thing around you. Every tiny step forward creates momentum. Every small act of self-care is an act of defiance against that feeling of hopelessness. Remember, small changes really can make a big difference to your health and happiness as you get older. It's not about reversing time. It's about living fully in the time you have. It's about finding joy, energy, and connection right here, right now. You have so much wisdom, so much experience, so much to offer. Don't let the feeling of being stuck rob the world and yourself of that. If anything in my story resonated with you, or if you have your own experiences of overcoming challenges later in life, I would absolutely love to hear about it. Please share your thoughts or your journey in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to feel a little less alone, a little more hopeful. And if you found this video helpful or encouraging, please give it a like. It helps me know that this kind of content is reaching the people who need it. And if you'd like to see more videos about living your best life at every age, simple tips for health and happiness in later years, then please do subscribe to my channel. Together, we can support each other in navigating this incredible chapter of life. Thank you for watching. Live your best life at every age.